this week, and then I promise I won't do any more. Voter and voter behavior. So we've been talking about citizenship, and a big part of citizenship is voting. If more and more people would do it. But let's talk about what this means, what voter behavior tends to look like, and all those type of things. So let's go to our first slide. So, suffrage is defined as the right to vote. A lot of people hear the word suffrage and they think it is a bad thing, but suffrage is a good thing. On this slide, you can see by the various years that different groups of people in the United States got to vote, and we've kind of talked about this a little bit. Between 1810 and the 1840s, really it was property qualifications that got you the right to vote in the United States. By 1870, the passing of the 15th Amendment eliminated race. So any males over the age of 21, in theory, could vote, including African Americans. By 1920, gender is eliminated, so women get the right to vote. In 1961, the 23rd Amendment was added so people in Washington, D.C. could vote. Remember, they weren't a state, and because they weren't a state, people who lived there were not allowed to vote. The 24th Amendment passed, basically saying, 1964, not allowing poll taxes. You cannot be charged a fee in order to vote. And the 26th Amendment lowered the voting age to 18, so anyone in this country 18 or older has the right to vote. Universal requirements set by the state. So let's talk about what gives you the right to vote. First of all, to vote, you have to be a citizen. This varies a little bit by state. There's nothing in the Constitution that says an alien should not be able to vote, but for most states, they require citizenship. They also require residency. The rules on this also vary by state a little bit. The requirement to live in the state for a given period of time is usually a requirement. That varies by state before you're considered a resident and allowed to vote. But again, age is the only other requirement, and we know that that is 18 or higher. Registration. Registration is a procedure of voter ID to prevent fraudulent voting. So in the state of Missouri, for example, you have to register to vote. This was sort of a more progressive reform that came about in the early 1900s. All states except North Dakota require you to register. Most people register when they go get their driver's license. So when you're 18, you may go get a new driver's license and you can register to vote right then and there at the driver's license facility. This was a law passed in 1995 called the Motor Voter Law that allows you to easily register there. There are other places that you can register too. You can go online even these days and register, but a lot of people do it just because it's really easy to do at the DMV. Persons denied the right to vote. Well, no state allows anyone living in a mental institution to vote, FYI. A quarter of the states deny voting to felons. This is starting to change. More and more states are allowing convicted felons to get their right to vote back. So that fraction might be a little off. A few states do not allow anyone who is dishonorably discharged from the military to vote. If you don't know, being dishonorably discharged from the military, some people compare it sort of to the equivalency of a felony. If you're dishonorably discharged from the military, finding a new job can be a little bit of a challenge. Also, some states do not allow you to vote if you don't have proper identification. And that varies again by state. In Missouri, I got my voter ID card as a registered voter. I can go and use my voter ID card to vote, or I can also bring my driver's license to vote. So that's how things work in Missouri. So, why do this chart goes between 1972 and 2012. Look at this. Close to 45 million people did not vote in 2008. This is the voter turnout in the presidential elections, for heaven's sake, which is when we should have the highest voter turnout, right? If you look at these statistics, barely half of the eligible population generally turns out to vote. You can see in between 72 and, 2000, it was really sort of floating around in the 50% range. 2004 and 2008 were pretty high. 2012 dropped off. I will tell you there was higher turnout, for example, among African American voters when Barack Obama ran for president. And you can see by looking at that here. But a lot of Americans still simply choose not to vote. So why? What are some excuses that people give? My vote won't count. I have to tell you, in my opinion, it does. And there are so many local issues that you need to vote on. It's not just about voting for the president. It's about voting for so many other people that make decisions much closer to home. I'm too busy to vote. I have to drop off the kids at school. I have to go to work. I just don't have time. I'm not registered, is another one. In Missouri, you need to register at least 3 weeks before the election. And if you aren't registered, sorry, you aren't voting. I don't really like either candidate is another excuse that's often thrown out there. I don't like candidate A, I don't like candidate B, so I really don't want to vote for either, so I'm just not going to vote. Lines to vote are too long. A lot of people want convenience, and that's not always guaranteed in a busy polling place. It depends on if you live in a small community. It depends if you live in a big city. People can stand in line for hours to vote, and some people just choose not to. I can't get to the polls. In this case, some people literally may not have transportation. In a day and age when, we have Uber and Lyft and all of these things, think of elderly folks, though, who maybe aren't comfortable with using those services or don't have an easy way to get to the polling place. That can be a problem. The weather's too bad. Believe it or not, when there is bad weather, there is generally less voter turnout. Apparently, we think we're going to get wet and melt. The news is already saying my candidate is winning or losing. You have to remember there is a time span across the United States. There's a 4-hour difference between New York and California, or 3-hour difference, excuse me. Well, no. If it's noon in California, it's 1 o'clock in Denver, 2 o'clock in Chicago, 3 o'clock in New York, so 3-hour difference. In this instance, some polls on the East Coast may be closing, and people who haven't even gotten to go vote yet, they're telling them, the news is telling them that, one candidate is already going to do really well or going to do really poorly. So, some states have higher voter turnouts than others, and it's kind of interesting. This compares them between 2008, which is in the parentheses, and then 2012. If you look at Missouri, Missouri has fallen, and with the 2012 election, we were ranked 18th. Only about 63% of our voters turned out, eligible voters, which had gone down significantly from 2008. Look at the states where there's a lot of voter turnout, though. Minnesota, Wisconsin, Colorado, New Hampshire, Iowa, all above 70%. That is pretty impressive. If you look at some of the states with the lowest voter turnout, you were talking, below 50%? Oklahoma, West Virginia, Hawaii, all tend to have less voter turnout. Let me give you the definition for a word. Idiot. From the Greek word meaning idiotes, I believe, those who do not vote or take part in civic life. That is the definition of an idiot, just in case you were learning, or at least one Greek definition. So, let's talk about some sociological factors determining whether or how people vote. Let's look at age. This is voting by age in the presidential elections. This is 96 to 2004. The percentage who voted of the voting age population. In 2004, you can see there was a higher turnout across the board. Look at the 18 to 24 category, though. Voting has gone down. Voting in the 25 to 34 category has gone down. Voting in the 35 to 44 category has gone down. It's gone down really in all categories, but it's dropped lower, or dropped more, excuse me, amongst younger voters. Unfortunately, younger voters don't seem to think that politics impacts them as much, and they tend not to go vote. So, some sociological factors. Sorry about the clocks going off in the background. Income and occupation. Sorry, I put on all of these here as Democrats. I should have mixed it up a little bit. Lower income and lower occupation voters tend to vote Democrat. People with college graduates, college graduation diplomas, degrees, tend to vote Democrat. So there's sort of this middle area where there tend to be a lot of Republicans. Gender, women tend to vote more Democrat. Age, younger people tend to vote more Democrat. Okay, let's look at a few other things here. Religion. Republican parties has had some recent gains in this area. Most Protestant religions tend to vote Republican. So Protestant means you are Christian but non-Catholic. Catholics and Jews tend to vote Democrat. These are not always straight facts across the board, but tend to be. Ethnic groups, African Americans typically vote Democrat. Hispanics tend to vote Democrat. Families, 9 out of 10 married couples share partisan leanings. So most married couples tend to have the same political ideologies or close to. And 2 out of 3 people vote like their parents. That is a huge impact on how we vote. So let's look at a couple of other things. A few other sort of terms in this category. There are something called straight ticket voters. Some states have this, some states don't. We're literally, instead of, like, let's say there are 10 offices and 10 people are running for 10 different offices. When I lived in Illinois, I was able to click one click at the top of the ballot that said straight ticket. And voting straight ticket basically meant you were voting for every Democrat on that list. And a lot of people do vote straight ticket, even if I have to go in and do it by hand. Let's say I want to vote straight Republican. In Missouri, there's not one button or one circle to color in at the top of the page. But voting straight ticket means you vote straight Democrat or straight Republican. Some people are split ticket. This is very much my mother. Split presidential and congressional and or state and local. Sometimes you'll vote Democrat, sometimes you'll vote Republican. There are also people out there that consider themselves independent. I really don't identify with one party or the other. I kind of vote for whatever candidate floats my boat on any given issue at any given time. And that is actually very much a growing group in the United States. Real quick, I just wanted to show you this slide to kind of give you an idea of where the Democrats and where the Republicans tend to be in the United States. You can see the lower right-hand corner is the 2008 election. Okay, the 2008 election you can see by the red and the blue which states tended to be Democrat and Republican. Sorry, I'm looking something up real fast. So, in 2008, in 2008, you had President Obama running, which is again the lower right-hand corner. Look at this. You can see where most of the red is, sort of down the middle of the country. New Hampshire, South Dakota, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas. Notice though, in 2008, a lot of African American voters turned out to vote in the state of Missouri to help get President Obama elected. You also, again, we've kind of looked at these tendencies. The East Coast and the West Coast tend to be more Democratic too, and then you kind of have this patch sort of in the middle with Illinois, Iowa, Wisconsin. Now, if you look at 2012, Obama ran again. Missouri, however, went the opposite way in 2012. And notice how some different states, which states stayed the same and which states changed a little bit. You can see, for example, Arizona changed. You can also see North Carolina changed. But again, it varies. So many people vote different ways depending on so many influences, and it's not just one thing. So I wanted you to think about some of that. Hope y'all are doing well. See you later.